This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Ata holiest ladas, ki Hashem hu Elokim, ein od milvadai. Ata holiest ladas, you instructed us to know that the Ribono Shel Olam is God. There's nothing besides Him. We just read this pasuk in this morning's Kriyas HaTorah. This fundamental pasuk, ein od milvadai, is one of the highlights of Kriyas HaTorah for Tisha B'Av. But there's one other occasion. There's one other occasion that the Kehila reads and recites this pasuk of Ata holiest ladas as a tzibur, at least according to Nosach Ashkenaz, and that is on Simchas Torah. Before we open up the Arayin, even before we say Vayhi b'Nsaya ha'Arayin, we're mechabed somebody to recite the pasuk Ata holiest ladas, ki Hashem hu Elokim, ein od milvadai. Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah. How unusual for these 2 days to have this commonality. Says Rabbi Yosef of Kasani in the Sefer Armole, this teaches us that Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah, the 2 days we highlight this pasuk, it teaches us that there's a profound connection between Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah. Perhaps in the past we may have wondered, Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah, what possibly could be the connection between Simchas Torah and Tisha B'Av? But unfortunately this year, we have come to learn the frightening connection between Simchas Torah and Tisha B'Av. In Kinuch Chav Daled, Rabbi Lezer HaKalir, he laments Al Churban Beis HaMikdash, Kihuras V'Chihudash, over the destruction of the temple that was trampled, that was torn down. Esped Aspod B'chol Shana Misped Chadash. I will compose a new elegy annually. Annually, a new elegy, a new kinah. Why would we compose a new kinah every year? It's same old. The story is static. Nothing changed. It is what it is. Why compose a new story every year? But the story is not static. The story changed. There's a new story. This year, there's a new story. This year when we read in Eicha, Shavas Mesois Libeinu. This year when we read, the joy of our heart ceased, Nepach Le'evel Mechaylenu. Our dancing turned to mourning. Do you understand what these words mean this year? Our dancing turned to mourning. Literally, Simchas Torah was transformed into mourning. The Hakafos in Eretz Yisrael were literally interrupted by people who heard the news. They came running in from shul to shul, from neighborhood to neighborhood, telling everyone who hadn't heard. Hamas broke through the border fences of Gaza. They're racing through the south. They're murdering Jews in middle of Hakafos. They stopped the Hakafos. They ran to the Amud to say Tehillim. Most shuls couldn't even continue the Hakafos. It was Mamish Nepach Lo'evel Mechaylenu. This year when we said the words Al Eila Ani Boichia, Eini Yarda Mayim, Hayubanai Shaimemim. This year when we said my children were laid desolate, it wasn't referring to children only 2,000 years ago. It wasn't only referring to children in the times of the Holocaust. It was referring to Jewish children murdered this year in the most inhumane, barbaric fashion. According to reports, children were put in ovens. This year, when we said in Eicha, Yisoimim hayinu ve'ein av, we are orphans without a father. Who cannot think about what happened in Kfar Aza, a massacre of historic proportions? Did you know 60% of the whole village was annihilated, brutally murdered, atrocities that mirrored some of the horrific tragedies of the Holocaust? You know, in one home, a father and mother went into the safe room with their twin baby boys. They took twin baby boys. They're locked up for hours and hours. The babies are crying. The mother, Nebuch, has nothing to feed the children. The mother has no choice. She figured the coast is clear. She didn't hear any noise. She leaves the safe room. The moment she left the safe room, the terrorists found her. She's tortured in the most despicable way. And then she's murdered. Then her husband was murdered because he came to save her. And when United Hatzalah volunteers were waiting outside of Kfar Aza, they're stunned when they saw two soldiers come, present them two twin baby boys who were crying for 14 hours. No one was able to answer their cries. They didn't even know, Nebuch, these babies were Yisoimim Hayinu Ve'einav, that the parents were killed. How did the babies survive? The babies were literally in the hands of the terrorists. The terrorists were holding on to the babies, knowing the babies were starving, crying. They were going to use the babies to lure residents of Kfar Aza to come to save the children, and then they would ambush them and kill them. And the residents of Kfar Aza knew what the plan was, so they had to restrain themselves and make themselves deaf to the heart-rending cries of these babies. Eventually the soldiers came, they fought off the terrorists. In the middle of the battle, the soldiers grabbed the babies, run out with bullets flying overhead, jumped into a jeep, drove away. They present the babies to United Hatzalah volunteers. What are they going to do with two little babies? They're looking for the parents. Nebuch, the parents were killed. They present these two babies to Loyaleno, the grandmother. To the grandmother who Nebuch lost her son and her daughter-in-law. And now she has two babies who are too young even to understand that they are Yisoimim Hayinu Ve'ein Av. When we say in Eicha, Imoisenu Ka'almanois, could you not think of a young wife of Yosef Gedalia, who was married for 1 year, and he went off to Gaza to fight, and he never came back, and his wife Sinai and Almana at 23 years old. This didn't happen 2,000 years ago. This didn't happen in the Holocaust. This happened now, this year. When we say in Eicha, Nashim b'Tzion inu, women in Tzion abused, on the pinnacle of Zman Simchaseinu, on Shmini Atzeres, when the Rebbeinu Shem tells Klal Yisrael, I just want one more day together with you. Benois Yisrael are abducted and violated. The whole world has changed since October 7th. It used to be post September 11th. Now it's post October 7th. It's a different world. We now live in the world after October 7th. People who were around in 63, they remember where they were in November of 63 when JFK was assassinated. I'm not remembering that so well right now. We could all remember where we were when the Twin Towers came falling down. We will remember forever where we were when we heard about the October 7th attack. So it's the same script. But now there's a new story. Some of the details of the story we've never heard before. On Shabbos Chazoin we learned, Uvifarizchem kapechem alim einai mikem. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, when you stretch out your arms in prayer to me, I ignore you. I'm not listening. Gam ki sarbu tefila eineni shomeya. I'm not listening to you anymore. For the first time in the history of the Jewish people, we now have Mekoimos HaTefillah that are closed. They weren't closed in COVID. They're closed now, post-October 7th. Meron was closed on Lag BaOmer for the first time. Kever Arizal on the 5th of Av, just now, was closed. Like we read in Kinnis, in Eicha, Sakoisa ba'anon lach me'avar tefillah. There's always great sensitivity, especially among B'nai Torah, B'nai Yeshiva, from adding anything to the liturgy of our tefillos, from adding anything to the liturgy of our piyutim. We deem ourselves unworthy to join the ranks by adding our own compositions. But nevertheless, it's interesting, when it comes to Kinnos, there is some precedent that as an individual, as a yachid, in order to elevate, in order to make more meaningful one's recitation of kinnos, to make the tsar more real, that one is given authorization for themselves at least to compose a kinnah. There's a sefer Seder Hayom. Seder Hayom was written by Rav Moshe ben Machir, Talmud of the Arizal. He wrote the following tefillah. I hope you say it. Moida ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechazarta bi nishmasi bechemla kama. Pause. Rabbi Emunasecha. He's the author of this tefillah. He writes in Seder Hayom, Mitzvahi al kol adam lechaber kinim vehege vahi. There's a mitzvah on every individual to compose lamentations, kinnis, v'loimer oisam v'yom amarazent, to say them on this bitter day. Utzdaka yechashev lai. It will be considered righteousness for him. V'nikra me'avele Yerushalayim u'mikdoisheha. But if you can't do it, u'misheina bar hachi, yasek b'mashechibra acherim, then rely on what others have written. Just to evoke the Hargasha, if I could read to you a few stanzas from one of these kinnos that were written for October 7th, not that we have the authority to add this annually to our liturgy or even to officially include it this year, but just to get a little feel for what the Mekoinen says, Esboid b'chol shana mispeid chadash. Aleila ani boichia v'libi noyem nehimais. This is a paraphrase of Kina Chavei. For this my heart cries. Michutz teshakel cherev umechador ameimois bebe'eri v'reim kfaraza sederois. All of these kibbutzim chalelai mutalim arumim v'arumais nevlasam kesucha l'chayas haaretz. Or what about this line? How the world, how they've loved us so much since October 7th. It's like the Jewish people, we're just everyone's favorites now, right? Sinas oilam, la'am oilam, hoileches miskaberes. The eternal animosity for the eternal people gets greater every day. You know, when it was reported in the news, the atrocities that Hamas committed, that they put children in the ovens or that there were beheadings, the Jewish people were mocked that we reported this. Can you imagine? They torture us, they brutalize us, and then they mock us for talking about it. But let's come back to the unusual connection between the two polar opposite days. Hachag asher nepach liyogoin v'tzara. Yoim matan das savarti l'choygaga. We thought we would be able to celebrate the day the Torah was given on Simchas Torah. Uve'makoima ad hayoim seirad einai dima. But since that day, my eyes pour forth with tears. You know, the Gemara in Bechoros tells us about a conversation between the Chachmei Atuna, the sages of Athens, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanani. And they come to Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanani with two white eggs. And they say, Rabbi, one white egg came from a white chicken, a Weisse chicken. The other white egg came from a black chicken. Is this possible? And he said, yeah. Says the Maharsha, what exactly is this conversation? Two white eggs, white chicken, black chicken. Says the Maharsha, there are two periods in our calendar of 21 days. The incubation period of an egg is 21 days. One time I got a call from my friends in Williamsburg. They wanted to be mechabed me, to be mekayim shiluach hakein. So they took me to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I climbed up. I was mekayim in the midst of shiluach hakein. I said, what do I do with the egg? They said, eat it. I said, eat a Brooklyn pigeon's egg? Are you kidding me? They said, it's cleaner than anything you get in the stores. These pigeons are so healthy, like clockwork. Every month, they give birth to the egg hatches 21 days. Perfect. It's perfect clockwork. The incubation of an egg is 21 days. We have two 21-day periods in our calendar. We have 21 days of Rachamim from Rosh Hashanah till Hoshana Rabbah, and 21 days of Din from Shavas B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. They're asking Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanani, you have 21 days of Rachamim and 21 days of Puranus. Can one God give one nation Two 21-day periods that are so diametrically opposed to each other? And the answer is, of course, because they're not diametrically opposed to each other, because they're all rachamim. They all bring slicha, v'kapara, and aliyah to Klal Yisrael. Two 21-day periods. But the Bluzhever Rebbe took this further. In his Sefer Tfilat Tzadik, he writes, Kabolohi biyad hatzadikim, shehayomim halolu, diyemei hametzorim, hema keneged hayomim akdoshim, diyemei tishrei, me Rosh Hashanah, ad Shmini Atzeres. Why 21? It should be 22. Let's count Shmini Atzeres. Let's count Tisha B'Av. And in that case, says the Bluzhever Rebbe, not only did the days of Simcha correspond to the days of Bein HaMetzarim, but the days of Rachamim, of Tishrei, sweeten, are mamtik, soften the blow of the 22 days of the Bein HaMetzarim. In fact, in one of the editions of Amunah Seitecha, Rav Moshe Wolfson, in a not the classic edition, he brings that not only are the 22 days from Rosh Hashanah to Shmini Atzeres, not only do they correspond to the 22 days of Peranios of the Bein HaMetzarim, but it's the 9 days and the 9 days. You have 9 days of Sukkot, including Simchas Torah, and you have 9 days of the 9 days. Interestingly, we have a Shpizin on Sukkot, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David, and who visits us on Shmini Atzeres? Look at the Haftarah. The Haftarah Shmini Atzeres is all about Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo is the personality associated with Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres. And whose day is Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is the day of Yirmiyah Hanavi. Yirmiyah was born on Tisha B'Av. Yirmiyah cursed the day of his birth. So we have these two polar opposite days, Simchas Torah and Tisha B'Av. Says the Bluzhever Rebbe, not only is Simchas Torah keneged Tisha B'Av, Simchas Torah was a gift given to the Jewish people to sweeten, to soften, to lessen the blow of Tisha B'Av. Says the Shvilei Pinchas something astounding. You know, and the Yom Tiv of Shmini Atzeres. Why do we have the Yom Tiv of Shmini Atzeres? We have the Yom Tiv of Shmini Atzeres. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, please, Yidden, you spent 21 days together with me. His akfu li ma'ad oid, lashon chiba huzeh, kebanim haniftarim me'avihem. It's like children who take leave of their father. Kasha alai predaschem. We're all familiar, Kasha alai predaschem. But we usually understand it to mean, Hashem was with us 21 days. Could I please have one more day together with you? Says the Shvilei Pinchas, there's a deeper meaning. Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres was given to soften the blow of Tisha B'Av. Says Rebbeinu Shalom, Tisha B'Av is so painful to me. I so don't want to take leave of you because of Tisha B'Av. I have to leave the Mikdash on Tisha B'Av. I have to leave Klal Yisrael on Tisha B'Av. Kasha Olai Predaschem is going on Tisha B'Av. I don't want to have to take leave of you on Tisha B'Av. So I'm giving you a gift. I'm giving you Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, to soften the blow of Tisha B'Av. You know, Tisha B'Av has a very unusual name. We didn't say Tachnon. What would have been if Chas v'Shalom, the Shliach Tzibor Teh, would have tried to pull a fast one on you and said Tachnon? You would have let it slide? No, not a chance. The Shliach Tzibor would be able to pull off a Tachnon today. Everybody knows Tisha B'Av is called a Moyed. Kara alai Moyed lishbar bachar. A Moyed? What, you like today? You like sitting on the floor? You like not eating? You like torturous days? Why is Tisha B'Av a Moyed? There's one day on the calendar that's not a Chag. It's a Moyed. Don't you dare call Shmini Atzeres a Chag. The Rama says it's not a Chag. It's not a Chag. Don't say Shmini Atzeres HaChag Hazeh. It's B'yoim Hashmini, maybe Chag HaAtzeres, but it's not a Chag in and of itself, or B'yoim Shmini Atzeres. The Ramami Pano writes, a Chag means a circle. All the Yomim Tovim are on the perimeter of the circle. Because they revolve around the center point, which is Shmini Atzeres, which is a moyed, but not a chag. Says the Shvilei Pinchas, you know why Tisha B'Av is called a moyed? It's because of the deep connection it has with the quintessential moyed of Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. You know, on Tisha B'Av, our tefillos are blocked. They're sealed. What didn't we say last night in Kaddish? Tiskabel. How can we say Tiskabel? Miyom shechar beis hamikdash ninalu sharei tefila shenemar gam ki ezak v'ashaveya sasam tefilasi. Sakoisa ba'anan lach me'avar tefila, says the Belzer Rebbe, in the name of the Sar Shomel Belz. What the Rikudim of Simchas Torah do, I can't tell you. One thing I'll tell you, all the tefillos of the whole year that are scattered and unanswered, they go straight up to heaven, they go up straight up to Shamayim during the dancing of Simchas Torah. Says the Belzer Rebbe, a go'oinistic adrosh. We know Shmini Atzeres says, Regel, Bifnei, Atzmai. For how many halachos? 6. What's the mnemonic? Pazer Kasev. What does Pazer Kasev stand for? Pious, the lottery, in the Mikdash, the Zman, Shachiyanu, the Regel, the Karban, the Shir, the Bracha, says the Belzer Rebbe, Pazer. All the tefillos that have been scattered the whole year and not accepted because Miyom Shechara Beis HaMikdash Ninalu Shari Tefillah, Kasev or Koshev. Hashem is Makshiv Umazin L'Tfiloseinu on Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres was a gift to the Jewish people to give us cut us some slack for Tisha B'Av. In fact, what is Shmini Atzeres called? It's called Yichud HaShalim, where the Rebbeinu Shem is meyached, so to speak, with Klal Yisrael. Hashem says, forget the karbanos on Shmini Atzeres. There are very few karbanos on Shmini Atzeres. Only par echad. Instead, Hashem, I want to be meyached with Klal Yisrael. Says the Shvilei Pinchas, the influence of Shmini Atzeres on Tisha B'Av is so profound that when the Goyim come into the Beis HaMikdash, instead of seeing the Kruvim back to back, which would reflect Ein Oisin Ritzono Shamakoim, the Goyim see the Kruvim embracing B'Yichud HaShlim. That was the influence of Shmini Atzeres on Tisha B'Av. In fact, did you hear the good news? Did you hear who was born today? Mashiach was born. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. After Chatzos, we get up, we sit on the chair. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. In fact, last night I saw an amazing gematria of Rabbi Moshe Wolfson. The latent potential for the Bayis Hashlishi on Tisha B'Av, if you take the hidden letters of the word Tisha B'Av, you spell out Tisha B'Av b'miluai. Spell out the Tuf b'miluai, the Shin b'miluai, the Ayin b'miluai, the Hey b'miluai. The numerical value of the Oisios Ne'elamais are Bayis Hashlishi, the third Beis HaMikdash. That's the latent potential of Tisha B'Av. Where does this possibility for Mashiach come from on Tisha B'Av? That's also the influence of Shmini Atzeres. As the Goyin teaches, Yom HaShmini, the harp of Mashiach has 8 strings. The 8th days of Sukkot reflect the Geula, says the Gra. Marv Rabbi Sai. So what does it mean? If this year, not only did Shmini Atzeres not influence Tisha B'Av, but what does it mean if Shmini Atzeres itself is turned into Tisha B'Av? What does it mean for Klal Yisrael if Tisha B'Av influenced Shmini Atzeres? How great the Midas Hadin must have been if this year, Lo Yaleinu, we experienced the Tisha B'Av on Shmini Atzeres. Of course, there's no question the Rebbeinu Shem did not abandon us. Even at the time of the greatest Hester Panim, there was tremendous Giloi Shechina. There were miracles and miracles. You know, during those early hours of Simchas Torah morning, you think there were any police yet on the highways? You think the army was on the highways? The highway to Jerusalem was clear. What if the Hamas would have continued to Jerusalem, would have gone to Yerushalayim? Who knows what they could have done? Why didn't they? It was a nes nigla, it was an open miracle. Every hotel in Yerushalayim was packed to the gills with American tourists, with no security. Had Hamas continued on their way, the result would have been catastrophic. But they didn't. It was a miracle. You know, Rabbi Baruch Rosenblum, he's a big Maggid in Eretz Yisrael. So he tells a story that the morning of October 7th, in the secret headquarter room, all of a sudden they're watching drone footage of a tank blow up, and then a second tank blow up, and then a third tank. You know what it means for a tank to blow up? 12 soldiers fit in a tank. That means the Israeli army would have the unfortunate job of notifying 36 Nebuch families that their loved ones had passed away. What happened? How could there have been such a failure? And all of a sudden they get a phone call. Who is it? It's one of the soldiers. Huh? You know, what world are you calling from? He's fine. Everything's okay. See, everything's okay. We're watching drone footage of your tanks being blown up. What do you mean everything's okay? So you wouldn't believe what happened. Minutes before the terrorist onslaught, we realized that a part of one of the tank wasn't working properly. We didn't have enough time to fix it. We had no choice. We jumped out of the tank and we ran for cover. The guys in the tank next to us, they see that we abandoned ship. They figure there must be a security concern. They also jumped out of their tanks, as did the third. We're all okay. That was an open miracle. But at the same time, the tragedies that happened are unspeakable. More than 1,200 Israelis were killed, more than 250 taken hostage. Brutality and cruelty, the likes of which we haven't seen since the time of the Holocaust. And these are certainly tragedies worthy of mourning and crying on Tisha B'Av. And here is where we come to the most challenging part of the subject. What's the point of remembering it? What's the point of remembering tragedy? Isn't it bad enough we had to experience it in the first place? Now we have to torture ourselves and not eat and sit on the floor and remember it? We know what happened. We didn't forget. Why do we have to rehash and make ourselves more miserable than we are already? For what? You like today? You enjoyed it? You like not eating? You like sitting on the floor? You like Tisha B'Av? For what? What do we need this for? You know, there's a famous account recorded by the Ramah in the Sefer Torah Ha'olah of when Yirmiyah Hanavi was weeping on the Har HaBayis and he met none other than Apalaton, Plato. And Plato asked Yirmiyah Hanavi, you're a grown man, you're an intelligent person, what are you crying about? You're crying over the destruction of your temple? It happened. Are you going to bring it back? Why are you crying over spilled milk? And that's a question we all have to ask ourselves. In other words, what is the point of this Tisha B'Av? What's the point of rehashing tragedies that happen? We cannot change what happened. You know that the Nesivos HaMishpat authored an epic commentary on Megillas Eicha entitled Palgei Mayim. And in his introduction, he advances, there is no independent, inherent value in Judaism of crying over tragedy. To weep and mourn tragedy. What's the value? What do you get from that? What do you accomplish? You make yourself happy? You think you make the Rebbeinu Shalom happy that you cried over something that happened that you can't change? Says in the Sivis, it only has value if it's constructive. It only has value if it's for the purpose of Nachbesa derachenu v'nach koira v'nashuva el Hashem. It only has value if you investigate and identify what caused the tragedy, what was the chait that elicited, why did the Shamayim respond that way, and what can I do to make sure this never happens again? Otherwise, it's pointless. It's pointless. What value is there crying over something you can't change? And by the way, just parenthetically, in the prism of the Nesivos, before mourning and commemorating the Holocaust, he would apparently maintain that in order for it to have value, it has to be for the purpose of identifying what could be learned from the tragedy, not for the sake of appreciation of history. So let's talk about October 7th. Last night when we read in Eicha, Shichach Hashem b'Tzion Moed v'Shabbos, that Yom Tif and Shabbos were forgotten in Zion. It's above my pay grade and chas v'sham to indict any Jews. But the facts are October 7th was both a Shabbos and a Yom Tif. And its holiness, Hashem Yishmerenu, was forgotten. Kedusha Shabbos was forgotten. Kedushas Yom Tif was forgotten. And look at the end of the pasuk. Shikach Hashem b'Tzion Moed v'Shabbos v'yinatz b'zam apoy. It elicits the wrath of the Shamayim. Simchas Torah was forgotten. You know, there was a yeshiva nearby, Tifrach, with 1,500 bachrim and not a single gun. They didn't go into the yeshiva where it wasn't Shikach Hashem b'Tzion Moed v'Shabbos. Can you ignore the accounts of a number of moshavim that were in line of their travels, that the doors were locked because it was a Shabbos and they were unharmed? I'm sure you know the story. I'm sure you know the story about the one family in a particular kibbutz who decided to take upon themselves Shmir Shabbos. And they were not comfortable staying the Shabbos in this kibbutz anymore. So their practice was they would go elsewhere, eat Shabbos. Comes October 7th, and the mother is nearing her due date. She tells her husband, I know we're not comfortable here, but I can't get out of bed. Let's just stay home for Shabbos. And when the noise began, and the commotion began, and the terror began, and they hear all the noise outside, and they figure it's only a matter of time until it comes to them, and hours and hours and hours pass, and then the IDF comes, and they catch a terrorist with plans on him, and they have a map of the whole kibbutz, and every single home in the kibbutz, and information about the personal activities of each family, and about that family it says, don't go there, they're not home for Shabbos. Heaven forbid, this is not about being judgmental or condemning Jews. Maybe they didn't know better. Maybe it was our responsibility. They were never taught the beauty of Shabbos. They were never taught the beauty of Torah. It's not about them. He wants to give me extra time. It's not about them. You know, there's a tradition from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov teaches that if you see somebody do an Avera, okay, so you may have a responsibility of Teichacha. That depends on the particulars of the situation. But the question is, why is Rebbeinu Shalom showing you the Avera? The fact that Yankel Beryl did the Avera, that's his problem, that he has to work on. But why is Rebbeinu Shalom showing it to you? The Rebbeinu Shalom is telling you, this is you. This is your flaw. This is your shortcoming. The other guy, that's his problem. But I'm showing it to you because this is what you need to work on. You know, you say, what can I do about it? Mesilas Yesharim tells us to daven for the dar. When a person does a mitzvah, the highest level of doing a mitzvah, you don't just put on tefillin for yourself. You don't just put on tefillin for your family. The highest level of asiyas ha-mitzvah is for the entire generation, to protect the generation, to give the Rebbeinu Shalom nachas from the whole dar. Do we do that? When we're mispalel, hashivenu avinu l'sarasecha, is it only for our children, or is it also for the Rebbeinu Shalom's children? If Klal Yisrael saw a Chilul Shabbos, a Chilul Yom Tif, a Chilul Simchas Torah, what does it say to us? Not what does it say about them. What does it say about our Shmiras Shabbos? What does it say about our Shmiras Yom Tif? What does it say about the way we observe Simchas Torah? I know we can't indict, but the Nesivos writes in his commentary to Eicha that there is no value in remembering Jewish tragedy if you can't identify something to learn from it. Otherwise, it's an effort in futility. So I wrote a message to Rav Pinchas Friedman this Friday. In light of everything we learned, in light of the compelling connection between Simchas Torah and Tisha B'Av, how do we view this terrible tragedy that occurred on Simchas Torah? So Rav Pinchas Friedman wrote back to me. I'll read to you the letter. He wrote, "Ein safek sheyesh kesher bein ma she'alfei me'achenu beis Yisrael b'makoim lishma l'smayach im ha'Torah ha'magina u'matzli me'oivei Yisrael." There's no doubt that there's a connection, that if thousands of Jews, instead of rejoicing with the Torah that protects us from our enemies, hafchu es simchas Torah l'Tisha B'Av b'chilul Shabbos hamoini, hitzlichu sonei Yisrael lahafich es simchas Torah l'Tisha B'Av. But the Shvilei Pinchas shared with me that this would give us a deeper insight into that which Rebbeinu Shalom says, Kasha alai predaschem. Kasha alai predaschem is, it's very nice that here in Brooklyn and in our shuls, or wherever you may be, you're rejoicing in Avodas Hashem. But it's so difficult, all the other Jews, our brothers and sisters, sha'azvu es haTorah, Kasha alai predaschem, from the majority of Klal Yisrael, who doesn't know what a Shabbos is, who doesn't know what a Simchas Torah is. You know, there's one more haunting connection between Simchas Torah and Tisha B'Av. I don't know if you noticed the tune that we use this morning. There's one other time that we use this tune. Eicha yashva vadad ba'avur David avdecha al tashev koyanecha yubeshu tzedek v'chasidecha ki mitzion teitzei seira. Why are we using the tune of Tisha B'Av on Simchas Torah? This is the fundamental connection between these 2 days of the year. The only thing is, there's one little twist in the tune. That instead of ending like we do on Tisha B'Av, Chadesh Yameinu Kehekadem, instead of ending, Ki Mois Mastanu Katzafta Aleinu Ad Me'ayid, the tune ticks up. Ki mitzion teitzei seira dvar Hashem Yerushalayim ba'avur David avdecha al tashev pnei Mashiachecha. You know, when Mashiach comes, Megillas Eicha is still going to be one of the books of Tanakh. So the Ben Ish Chai wrote a sefer on Eicha explaining how it could be interpreted l'toiva. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. When Mashiach comes, all the Torah will emanate not from New York and New Jersey, but from Yerushalayim. L'toiva. Yeah, but what's the tune we're going to use? We'll take that little knetch at the end of the way we sing it on Simchas Torah. Hashiveinu Hashem Eilecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. That's what will happen to the tune. We're mispalel. Then the zchus of being from the Misablim over Yerushalayim, we should be zoicha that if this year Tisha B'Av was commemorated on Simchas Torah, we should be zoich Rebbeinu Shalom should give us Geula v'Yeshua on Tisha B'Av. After Chatzois, of course, is the beginning of the Geula. We should be zoicha to Geula Shleima b'Karev Mamish. V'vias kol tzadikim her v'yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.